Please like my videos, please subscribe to my channel, and please press the bell icon so that you get to know when my latest video has come. And to learn more and to find a video relevant to you, please do check out my videos list.
Hello, Namaskar and Adab to all my friends from your friend astrologer and guide Irfan, once more with you from your very own channel Astro Assurance. Today I am going to talk about a very important event in our lives which pertains to the relationship of Saturn in its transit over certain houses and over certain placements in the horoscope. Here I am talking about the transit of Saturn over the natal position of the moon. And natal position means wherever moon is placed in your respective horoscope, over that particular placement when Saturn transits, that is a period which is called the SADE SATI period. And this period is not only about Saturn transiting over natal position of moon, but also a house penultimate to that placement and a house after the placement of the moon, which means wherever moon is placed, a house before that, when Saturn enters into that, the SADE SATI period starts. 2.5 years of SADE SATI period of the rising period starts. Then over the natal position of the moon, another 2.5 years, which is called the peak period, and the final 2.5 years in the house next to the placement of the moon, or the second to the moon, which is called as the setting period of SADE SATI. So each of the periods in Sanskrit is called the Dhaya, or 2.5 years. So you have the rising 2.5 years, you have the peak 2.5 years, and you have the setting 2.5 years. Each of them has a very important manifestation in the horoscope and in our lives. And this period is very important because SADE SATI period has created a lot of fears also in people's lives, because generally the denotation of that or the understanding of SADE SATI is a period which is a period which may wreak havoc in our lives. So more deeper meaning of the SADE SATI period is important, specifically over various houses. Now on paper, SADE SATI period generally people think is for all the areas of your life for those 7.5 years. While most of the life is impacted, however, there is a deeper meaning of SADE SATI over certain houses, which means if moon is placed in your first house and then Saturn SADE SATI period starts from the 12th house and the first house and the second house, the 12th house 2.5 years in that house because Saturn remains in a house for 2.5 years, and then 2.5 years in the first house which Saturn remains in transit over, and the next house which is the second house in which Saturn remains for 2.5 years. So the 7.5 years period is important for each of the houses, and all the three houses are involved, and so this becomes more important because three areas of our lives and each house has many manifestations. So roughly a quarter of the houses are affected, and these quarter of the houses are related to many signs and many other houses, and hence SADE SATI period becomes a critical period because the house lords may be different, the signs may be different, and each of the house lords combine or rule two other signs. So roughly 9 to 10 houses of the horoscope at any given point of time are affected because moon aspects one house, Saturn aspects three other houses, with the third aspect, seventh aspect, and the 10th aspect, and Saturn's and moon's placement in the horoscope may be not close to each other but may be different from each other. So overall manifestation of SADE SATI is very important. So let's do a deep dive and understand when SADE SATI happens over a certain house, meaning when moon is placed in the first house, SADE SATI's peak period happens at that during that phase in the first house, as well as the rising period and the setting period. What are the deeper manifestations? What are the deeper meanings? So let's start with the first house first. Firstly, the first house starts for a stature, a prestige in society, a standing in society, a thinking process, also a health. So if moon is placed in the first house, then a lot of manifestation of the moon comes into play in the lagna, which means moon gives us good looks, moon gives us the softer looks. Moon also gives us an overall demeanor that this person can be a person who is very nurturing and caring, and it also brings in a soothing effect to people in their lives and how we generally relate to our life, how we think, how we take decisions, and how we are seen by society. So generally when SADE SATI period happens with Saturn going into the penultimate house to the moon, which is in the 12th house, and then over the first house in which moon is placed, and then the second to the moon, each of these has a deeper and stronger meaning. So what does this mean? So when the rising period starts, when Saturn is in the 12th house to the moon, when moon is in the Lagna and Saturn moves into the 12th house. Now the 12th house is about waste and expenses, excesses. So whenever Saturn goes into a house, it is more protective of that house, whereas Saturn is more damaging through its aspects, especially if it's aspecting an inimical house and inimical sign. So when Saturn goes into the 12th house, it is also aspecting with its 7th aspect the 6th house, and Saturn is the Karaka of the 6th house and the other two Dusanas as well, which is the 8th and the 12th house. So because Saturn is the Karaka of the 12th house as well, so Saturn is also protective of the waste and excesses that a person may go through otherwise in his life. However, what happens, this is a SADE SATI period, this is a karma oriented period, this is a giving back period, this is a time to pay back any baggage that you are carrying, anything that you owe to people. So here Saturn, when it goes into the 12th house, makes one wary of the expenses. The person starts to think, am I doing well in my expenses? Am I okay in how I spend my money? Am I okay in the ratio of how much I earn versus where I am spending? So the first 2.5 years of the SADE SATI period, when Saturn goes into the 12th house, starts with that, and the anxiety and the frustration is about how much money you are spending and versus how much you are earning. So one focus goes into the money part of the life also. Why? Because when Saturn goes into the 12th house, it is also aspecting the second house with its third aspect, and second house is the house in the SADE SATI period of the setting period of Saturn when moon is in the Lagna. Now during the SADE SATI period, actually all the three houses get activated at the same time, but stronger and deeper manifestation happens of the house where Saturn is transiting over. So when Saturn is transiting over the 12th house, Saturn makes one wary of whether my position in life is secure or not, or is my status in society in a position where I am also getting back from what I am doing for others. So while I am a nurturing person, while I take care of others, are people also returning the favors to me? Are people also taking care of me? So the SADE SATI period of Saturn going over in the 12th house creates or activates the thinking process of, am I getting back enough? Should I really spend so much money or not? Am I wasting more money? And because the second house of income is also involved, so the person also starts thinking about, am I earning enough? Am I saving enough? So the first dhaya or the 2.5 years goes about thinking about, am I taking care of my expenses in a logical manner, in a practical manner also. So whenever the SADE SATI rising period starts, it starts the frustration and the anxiety and the fears. So SADE SATI creates those fears in life about the houses that Saturn transits over, and where Saturn rules the houses, and also where Saturn aspects. So here the person starts thinking about various areas of his life. Am I spending enough on my health? Am I overspending on my entertainment? Am I giving too much to my family or taking care too much? Or if you have to pay back loans, am I paying my loans enough? So the person starts thinking of various elements in his life. So expenses become important, and his livelihood and saving becomes more important, and he starts to think, am I earning enough in life or not, and am I getting back from society or from my work the status and the prestige and standing that in society I need to earn so far? Have I really earned it? So here the person looks at the how much I've invested, whereas how much I've got back in terms of spending, in terms of earning, and in terms of standing of the person in the society. So the person, because he starts to not thinking about, am I getting back enough, so the person starts to pull up his socks and thinking, and pull the strings also back, tries to tighten the purse strings, tries to relook at earning potential and status in society and how much he is giving. Now because moon is placed in the Lagna and aspects the 7th house, so here the person is also looking at, am I getting a balanced relationship perspective also, whereas am I getting back enough from the people who I am working with or I am related to, or from my spouse, or from my family, or from my team members, or from my partnership. And so because the fear is also there, so this anxiety, this frustration also leads to playing havoc on the mind, because moon is the mind, moon is the manas, but moon is also your emotions, your heart. So here Saturn is playing on both your mind and your emotion, and then Saturn forces you to take those wrong decisions. And so the biggest impact of SADE SATI is taking over of the mind by Saturn, and it forces you to make those paybacks, to make you pay. So if one is not careful about his emotions, one is not careful about his focus of mind, and one loses his focus, that is the bigger danger of SADE SATI than anything else. And now because it is going over the Lagna, so the thinking process is impacted. The person is looking at the pros and cons of his relationship, and whether he has got enough from the society, as a standing in society more than anything else, and is he getting enough respect? Are people really caring for him? Are really people giving him that importance that is due to him or not? And hence the SADE SATI period becomes a period of frustration, overthinking also, about overthinking about money, earnings. And so many times the person, because money becomes an important thing, status in society becomes an important thing, so some of the decisions are taken pertaining to money. So the person connects money and status in society and thinks, if I'm not getting enough financially from people, then they don't value me enough also. Or if I'm not getting my emotionally enough from people, then I'm not being valued. And so many times people may take wrong decisions, especially during the rising period, and the manifestation of that comes more so in the setting period. So by the time the person realizes what mistakes he has done, what critical areas that he has overlooked in relationship, in finances, and in his job and career, it becomes too late. A lot of the water has already flowed under the bridge, and by the time the person's eyes open up post the SADE SATI period, too late to recover anything, and so person can only mull over his or her losses. So it's important, especially when SADE SATI happens over the Lagna of the first house, while transiting to the 12th house, first house and the second house, one has to be very, very focused, because the Lagna is about the entire life, your entire existence. And so it becomes critical that you take care of your emotion, you take care of your focus. Don't spend too much money, keep the purse strings tight, however keep intact your emotion and your relationship, because the biggest damage that one does in SADE SATI is not so much about finances. Finances do take an impact. Your standing in society may take an impact, because SADE SATI, your Saturn is going over the Lagna. But the biggest impact can happen over your emotional well-being, your thought process and your relationship, because Moon and Saturn both will be aspecting the 7th house when Saturn goes over the Lagna. So if your Moon is placed in the first house, be wary that this could be a SADE SATI which could be a life-changing experience, not just in terms of money or standing in society, but overall relationship also, and that baggage can take years together or decades together to work out. And that is the placement of SADE SATI, or the manifestation of SADE SATI over the Lagna. Now, if the SADE SATI happens over the second house, which means that Moon is placed in the second house in your horoscope, and so the SADE SATI period starts when Saturn is moving over the Lagna, that is your rising period, and then SADE SATI peak period happens when Saturn goes over the Moon in the second house, and then the setting period when Saturn goes into the third house, which is the second to the Moon, and so 2.5 years. So when the first period, or the first dahiya, or the rising period of Saturn happens in the Lagna, when Moon is placed in the second house, so here the person starts to think about, am I earning enough? When Moon is placed in the second house, so the person generally has been more giving, maybe financially also more giving to family, emotionally also giving more to others. And because Moon is placed in the second house, so the person more or less is very principled in life, a person who leads his life by a lot of values. So a person, because of Saturn going into the Lagna and Moon placed in the second house in the natal chart, in the birth chart, the person starts to think about, I've been more giving financially to others, I have never cared too much of saving money, I may have thought about security in life, but still have been giving more, and have been more emotionally giving to others, have always taken care of others. And do people respect me back? Do people care about me enough or not? And have I earned enough from my focus, my efforts, my career? And if I have not earned enough because Moon is placed in the second house, Saturn is placed going over the Lagna. So the thinking process makes the person think more about the money part, but also about the effort, because while Saturn is going over the Lagna, the third house is also involved, because that is the setting period of Saturn. Saturn will be transiting over the third house as the setting period, and all the three houses, the Lagna, the second house and the third house, are activated. So the person starts thinking about his status in society and his efforts. He thinks that, have I earned enough for my efforts, where I have been giving more to people, where I have been emotionally more giving for people, more caring for people, and I have opened up my purse strings and I have given more, financially I have given more, and have I got back enough financially also from people? Have my efforts paid me good dividends or not? If my efforts have not paid dividends and my emotional contributions to others have not paid me dividends, then have I truly been able to achieve what I wanted in my relationship and in my earning potential? So the person's frustration and his anxieties and his fears can come to be taken about both his emotional life pertaining to the second house and about his efforts. And hence, many times a person who has so far lived a life of values and principles may think back and say that I have lived my life where I have taken care of others, but have I done the right thing or not? So the person rethinks on his values, rethinks on his principles. Not that he may do something against principles or his values, but many times the decision that he starts to take from now on may be different from what his family's heritage may be. And so because the decision making may go wrong, so his effort may not go in the right direction, because the third house is the setting period of SADE SATI. So by the time the setting period is over and the guy wakes up from the slumber that he is in, or the shock period that he is in during the SADE SATI, it becomes too late to understand that in the last 7.5 years his focus has been in the wrong areas. He has tried to overthink about his emotions, he has started to overthink about his money, he started to overthink about his standing in society, and so in the process he makes wrong decisions. He may change his career more thinking that if I earn more, my standing in society and my respect will go up, or my efforts will gain me more fruits only if I earn more money. So money, financial security, and whether efforts are paying him right dividends or not, and his own self-respect, own prestige comes into the question. And sometimes it so happens, even if the person is not thinking in those lines, circumstances may force him to take those decisions which may impact his earning, which may impact his emotional life, which may impact his overall well-being also, and the third house of effort. So most of the efforts seem to go waste, seem to not pay dividends also, if the SADE SATI is happening over the second house, where the Lagna, the second house and the third house are involved. So during the SADE SATI period, when SADE SATI primarily is happening over the second house, it is very, very important that you take care of your principles. Foundation should be very strong. You should not meander away from your principles and values, and keep a tight hold on your purse strings, and income and your livelihood may be affected. Many times the decision that you take during this time may hamper your earnings potential, or in fact stop it, or impact it deeply and negatively. So be really careful if the SADE SATI is happening over the second house, because the second house of earning, livelihood, principles, all are impacted. The third house of efforts going in the wrong direction are also impacted, and the Lagna, which means wrong decisions taken pertaining to earning and livelihood, spoiling a status or stature in life, because you have chased money, you have chased financial security maybe, or you have chased the emotional side. So if you have Saturn in the second house in the SADE SATI peak period, then we need careful of these. If the SADE SATI is happening over the third house, where Moon is placed in your third house, so here the second house, the third house and the fourth house all are activated. The second house is more activated during the first 2.5 years, the first Dhaya of SADE SATI, or the SADE SATI period, the 7.5 years period, and then the third house gets involved as the peak period in the second 2.5 years, and the fourth house gets involved in the third period, or the setting period, or the third Dhaya of SADE SATI. So because it is happening over the second, third and fourth house, primarily over the third house, the third house of effort becomes important here. So here the person is forced to put in more hard work. The person is made to chase more for getting the same results as before, or in fact keeping the stability in life, or sometimes to keep not from going down or not falling down in life, the person has to put in more effort, more hard work. And so many times the person's own communication skills may also be impacted. He could be more misunderstood because it is happening over the third house of communication, of marketing and branding, because here your own marketing, your own branding potential becomes impacted, which means you are not able to truly represent yourself right to people. Misunderstandings become the order of the day, miscommunication become the order of the day, and that impacts your second house of earnings because of your communication not being right. So in the rising period, when Saturn is going over the second house in the rising period, the first 2.5 years, because of your efforts not channelizing the right fruits of labor for you, so then your earning potential goes down. And so you, because Saturn is in the second house, you start to think that if I am going down or I am not getting the fruits of my labor, should I really tighten my purse strings or not, or should I spend more? So your family life also takes a beating because the person starts to tighten his purse strings, or is forced to tighten his purse strings because his effort is not giving him back the kind of earnings that he should get. And many times the setback could be where either stagnation in income can happen, or even a downfall of income and savings can happen. And so many times the person may have to open up his savings, which so far he may or not have touched, and he may only be investing in his savings. Now he has to open the purse strings and in fact open the savings box. If he is put into long-term savings, he has to open that because the expenses go through the roof sometimes, or to make even his ends meet, he has to dig into his savings during those 7.5 years, and primarily during the rising period and the peak period. And so because the effort is not manifesting right, Saturn going over the third house, his communication not giving him the right fruits, miscommunication, misunderstanding being the order of the day, his fourth house gets impacted. Fourth house is the house of his assets, what he has invested in and what all the conveniences of life are. So because the fourth house is the setting period, 2.5 years of Saturn going over that house, so overall in his manifestation or in his effort to not go down and keep his savings and his earnings intact, yet because his efforts are not giving him the fruits of labor, so overall his ability to be able to keep the conveniences or keep the assets intact also goes down. Many times when SADE SATI happens over the third house, the houses or the property gets impacted. Either your ability to purchase property or to purchase cars goes down, or something or the other happens where losses may happen, or stagnation in the property may happen, or earning from property may happen, or ability to be able to keep the property also, where sometimes or many times person even has to sell his property to be able to keep himself afloat. Cars may also give you more expenses, conveniences give you more expenses, breaking down of things may also happen. So overall the domestic life is also impacted because the setting period is happening for the fourth house, which is also the domestic life. So if your peak period of SADE SATI is happening with the third house, very, very important that you keep your communication very, very clear. Ensure that the misunderstanding don't happen. You don't affect the domestic life adversely by overthinking or being over emotional or thinking too much about your earning and saving potential and trying to keep the assets intact, and in that losing track, being frustrated, being fearful, because the fear here is of your assets and what conveniences you are saving. Financial security becomes a critical thing, and whether your efforts are giving you right fruits or labor becomes the main critical thing. So if your SADE SATI is happening with the third house, be very, very clear in your communication, take a back seat, be patient, and ensure that you don't invest in the wrong investments. Take care of your assets, take care of your domestic life, make patience your more virtue rather than being aggressive about things, and you will find that things will be okay by the end of the term of the SADE SATI period, if patience is what you have kept through the SADE SATI period. If your SADE SATI is happening over the fourth house, which means moon is placed in the fourth house in your natal horoscope. So the SADE SATI period's first 2.5 years starts when Saturn goes into the third house, that is the rising period, and then the second 2.5 years or the peak period happens when Saturn goes over the natal position of moon in the fourth house. And the setting period happens when Saturn goes over the 5th house and the last 2.5 years, or the setting period of the last 2.5 years of the final Dahiya. So the 3rd house, the 4th house and the 5th house become critical when Saturn is passing over the 4th house as its peak period of SADE SATI, or the 4th house becomes the important placement with Moon in the 4th house. So yeah, because Moon is placed in the 4th house, Moon is very strong in the 4th house, because Moon is the natural ruler of the 4th house. Now, basis which sign Moon is placed in, of course the manifestation will be different. However, Moon is still strong in the 4th house, so a SADE SATI over the 4th house has a lesser impact than a SADE SATI which may happen, for example, over the Lagna or the 7th house or even the 10th house. But SADE SATI here will impact your domestic life, will impact the peace and the harmony at home, will impact how happy you are in your life. So here unnecessary fears are created in the domestic life. Unnecessary issues are created in your 4th house of your mental peace. So something or the other will happen which will spoil your mental peace at home. Either something gets triggered in your career, something gets triggered in your earning potential, something gets triggered at work, something can be triggered even in your relationship, something can be triggered in health. All of which will impact your domestic life. Your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your family may be impacted when Saturn SADE SATI is happening over the 4th house. And because the first Dahiya starts with the 3rd house, so here the person's effort starts to wane and doesn't give him enough fruits of his labor, and his communication also starts getting wavy because of the impact on the 4th house, because the person is not getting the succor from the 4th house, the emotional support that he is getting from the 4th house, or he starts overthinking about that. So his effort towards his manifestation of the 4th house or his domestic life also starts to wane, or he starts to relook at whether I have got enough fruits of labor from my assets. Wherever I have put in my investment, have I got good returns of that? And he becomes more fearful of his financial security. It is not so much about money, because Saturn is about stability. So the person is overthinking about his stability in life and whether he is able to have the assets which will give him a secure future, because he is more caring or thinking about security of his future security or financial security. So his focus of the 4th house and also the domestic life becomes important. Sometimes he may try to pull up the strings of expenses, and because he's overthinking about his expenses, about his assets, so his efforts of where he should spend, where he should not spend, also go into a fearsome mode or fearful mode, where he's overthinking whether I'm getting the right returns or not. And because the 5th house is involved of love, romance, interest, happiness also, so the person's his demeanor of what makes him happy also doesn't make him so happy anymore, because here he is going through frustration, here he is going through anxieties. And children also become under the focus, because the 4th and 5th house are involved, so spouse gets impacted also, and the children also get impacted. So by the time you come out of the SADE SATI period, when Saturn goes into the 5th house and the setting period starts, that's when you realize, that's when you come out of the smoke screen that is created in front of your eyes, or you lost your way in the SADE SATI, whether you have truly lived a life where you have kept the focus, you have not disturbed the domestic life, and you have not disturbed the financial assets in trying to be overthinking or over anxious of the financial aspect of your life, or to protect the assets. Many times the assets may also come under question, where you may end up paying money for upkeep of the house or repair of the house, or trying to protect your property, and more money may have been spent, or you may loosen the purse strings, or you may even acquire property in trying to be more stable. However, that may also go into challenges during the SADE SATI period. So one has to be more wary of the documentation part when SADE SATI over the 4th house happens. So if your main period of SADE SATI or your peak period is happening with the 4th house, keep your domestic life in check, keep your assets under check. Don't try and be over anxious of your assets or financial security. Try and keep the patients at home in your domestic life, and take care of your children, because during this time both the domestic life and your children may be impacted. If the SADE SATI period is over the 5th house, which means a moon is placed in your 5th house in your natal chart, in your birth chart. So now 3 houses will be impacted. The 4th house will be impacted, the 5th house will be impacted, and the 6th house will be impacted. So the 4th house is where Saturn first transits into, and the first 2.5 years or the rising period of SADE SATI starts. And then the next 2.5 years happens where Saturn passes over the natal position of the moon in the 5th house, and the final or the setting period happens when Saturn moves into the 6th house in the final 2.5 years or the setting period or the final daya. So because the first 2.5 years is over the 4th house and that is the rising period, so yeah, it starts with some other nitty-gritty challenges coming from home, or challenges coming on your domestic life, or challenges coming in your grihasthana or with spouse, or domestic or with your mother or your family or even children. So some of the other issues come there, or the domestic issues or related to property or related to assets, they trigger something, because of which you rethink on your speculative investments of the 5th house. So if you have made any speculative investments so far, or you're thinking or you're made, then your ability to keep assets or protect the assets come into the question. You become more fearful of your investment. You also become more fearful of your career. Why? The 5th house is the 8th house to the 10th house. So your career or your placement in the company becomes impacted. There may be at least one change, sometimes even 2 changes in your job or in your career, or you may have to move your house because the rising period starts in the 4th house of grihasthana. So you may move house, you may move, or your domestic life comes under a spanner. You may have to, either you spend less time with your family, or you move away from your family, or you spend more time at work. Somewhere or the other your domestic life gets impacted, your ability to create more assets become impacted, and your speculative investments that you have done either in property or in shares, wherever you have invested, that comes under the spanner, and you rethink about that particular area. Second thing is, if you're thinking of starting a family during the SADE SATI period, especially when Saturn goes over the 5th house where moon is placed, then you may either have challenges in childbirth or even in conception, or there could even be a break up in a romance if you are in a romantic relationship. So the romantic relationship may also go for a toss. There may be a breakup, there may be issues, there may even be fear of the romantic relationship. You may start to think, does my lover love me enough? Does my spouse love me enough? Does my partner love me enough? Am I getting the return of the love and affection that I am giving? And so because of that, the challenges there start. So the 5th house areas are impacted, starting with the thought of whether I am getting enough nurturing back or not, because the 4th house is the rising period. 4th house is the period of 4th house is the house of nurturing. So if you have nurtured love, if you have nurtured romance, if you have nurtured children, you also start to think, am I getting the returns back? If you have nurtured investments, financial investments, you also think of, have I got the financial investments back in my life as a reward or not? Have I got the fruits of my investments or not? The investments can be in property, the investments could be in relationship, the investments could be in romance, the investments could be in children. So if you are going through the SADE SATI period in your late 40s, that's when you may start thinking, or your late 50s, you may start thinking whether your children are supporting you, whether your children truly respect you or not, whether the mannerism of the children is appropriate or not, or the children going on the right path or not, because the 5th house here is important. And so the 4th and the 5th and the 6th house getting impacted. So the 6th house is the house of sicknesses and illnesses also. So you may also face some small niggling issues, or issues related to your visceral organs, or your digestion may not be right, your eating habits may go for a toss, or you may face unnecessary acidity issues, stomach ulcers also for some people. Saturn is really strongly placed with malefics in your natal chart, so all these issues get triggered, or the 4th, 5th house and 6th house getting involved. So the grihasthana getting involved, the mental tensions getting impacted, frustrations, fears related to family life, related to investments, speculative investments, related to children getting impacted, and finally related to office, because the 6th house is the house of service and also the house of your team workers. So as long as your SADE SATI is of the 5th house, the main period, peak period is of the 5th house, involving 4th as the 6th house, the most important thing here is to not look so much back whether I've got good returns in my emotions, in my investments, in my career or in my children, but to think back and relax. Allow the time period to pass, because then by the time the period ends, you may have done too much damage, overthinking or taking steps to damage Grihasthana or damage your investment or damage your relationship with the children. Just keep meditate, be at peace, be more giving, keep the calm, and you will find when the SADE SATI period is over and you wake up from that smoke screen that you are in, you're better off not taking critical decisions and having kept your patience. When the SADE SATI happens over your 6th house, which means Saturn is passing over Moon in the 6th house. Now Moon is placed in your natal chart in your 6th house. So here the 5th house, the 6th house and the 7th house get involved. Why? Because the 5th house is the start of the first 2.5 years or the first Daya or the rising period of the SADE SATI, and then the second 2.5 years, which is the peak period of the SADE SATI, where Saturn is passing over the natal position of Moon in the 6th house, and the final period of 2.5 years where Saturn is passing over the 7th house of partnerships and of relationship. So here the 5th, 6th and 7th house become important manifestation during the SADE SATI period. So because the first 2.5 years starts with the 5th house, 5th house is the house of change, being the 8th house to the 10th house. So it generally starts with some change in your career or related to career or related to your income or earning potential, something related to your work area, something related to connected to work or livelihood also gets impacted, or your luck, especially because the 5th house is also the house of gains, so the luck in getting gains also starts to getting impacted, and because of which you rethink about how your life has gone so far in terms both of your career, because Saturn in your peak period will go over the 6th house, and in your relationship at work with your team members, relationship with your partner in business, and even relationship in your domestic life. So the 5th, 6th and 7th getting involved. The 5th house is also the house of romance. The first 2.5 years may also start with a breakup in your romantic relationship, or some churning in your romantic relationship, or some churning in your career, some change either in romantic liaison or your partnership or your career or your relationship with your team members, or sudden undue competition may start up because the 6th house is involved, or health going down the drain, because of which you start to rethink whether you have been able to really cater to your health, you have been able to cater to your career and to your relationship. You start to think about these, you start to get anxious about these, you start to get frustrated if you feel you have not got the result so far, and you become more fearful, because the biggest damage that the SADE SATI does is create more fear. So your fear comes in your romantic relationship. You may start doubting your partner, you may start doubting whether the relationship is a good enough relationship, rewarding enough relationship or not, whether you truly love the person or not. And if you're looking for a long-term relationship, you start to rethink seriously whether this relationship is important or not, and whether this has been something which is also being given to you or not and serving you or not. So rethinking may start in your career, rethinking may start in your romance, because of which undue attention may be given to competition, where you may start looking at other suitors to your partner or other people who are looking at your position in your career. So the competition house of the 6th house is also activated, and sometimes because of unnecessary fears, many of them which may not be holding much water, you may spoil your health of the 6th house also. And because of overthinking, you may create enemies when none existed, because fears are the most stronger manifestation of the SADE SATI period, and the anxieties and the frustration that it creates. So romantic life gets impacted, career may take a beating, or sudden change in your career may start off with the rising period of SADE SATI, and then your career is impacted or the service is impacted of the 6th house. So some change happening in projects or at work, ultimately impacting your service or your job, and then that impacts also your relationship, because the 7th house is also involved. So your ability to work with team members, your ability to work with others at work, and trying to keep the board from rocking also becomes important, because the 6th house of hidden competition also gets activated. And so what you truly like and love to do, which is the 5th house, stops to wane. So now you don't start to enjoy your career so much, you don't start to enjoy, or you stop enjoying your career, or stop enjoying as much as you were getting back the satisfaction in your career and your job as before. That starts to tell on your team members also, your relation with team members, and even your domestic life, because the 5th, 6th and the 7th house is impacted. Unnecessary fears in your love life may also impact the 7th house of domestic life and the 5th house of romance. So many times when the SADE SATI is happening with the 6th house, romance is something which comes under a spanner. Romance is where you may have a loss, even a breakup, and the 7th house of relationship becomes important, because the relationship in a domestic life is directly also connected to the romance or the love and affection that you have. So if you have SADE SATI going over the 6th house, career becomes critical. Changes in career, changes in your speculative investments become critical, and your partnership both in your domestic life and at work may be impacted. So take your time off, give more space to your partner, give more space to your team members, cull the unnecessary fears and unnecessary frustrations and anxieties, and allow the time to pass, so that by the time you get up out from the smoke screen at the end of your SADE SATI, you must not have lost too much in terms of your relationship, in terms of your love, and in terms of your career. If the SADE SATI is happening over the 7th house, which means Moon is placed in the 7th house, and Saturn will go over the Moon's placement in the 7th house in the peak period. So now here the 6th house, the 7th house and the 8th house are involved, which means the 6th house being involved and the 8th house being involved means two dusthanas are involved, and even the 7th house is a Marakasthana. So 6th, 7th and 8th house, one of the more important houses in the horoscope, get impacted, and because the two dusthanas are impacted and the 7th house of relationship gets impacted, and also partnership gets impacted, and the 6th house of service, career get impacted, and 8th house of obstacles, sudden upheavals become active, and so sicknesses, obstacles, sudden turbulations, which in turn disturb your ability to work with people, because the 7th house is not only a partnership or partner or your marital life, but also of anyone and everyone who you meet on a day-to-day basis. So the SADE SATI period over the 7th house, where Moon is placed in your 7th house, so the nurturing that you have done so far in your relationship and in your ability to work with people, where you have nurtured people, where you have been caring for people, where you have taken care of people, that comes under the question, because the 6th house of competition gets impacted, hidden enemies get impacted. So the fears related to the 6th house starts and triggers the challenges of the 7th house and the 8th house. So here you may start to think that I have been so nurturing to others, I have taken care of my partner. Is my partner also truthful to me, committed to me, caring for me, and does the partner love and honor me or respect me? And so because you are now thinking of whether you have got good returns or enough returns in your partnership, you may unnecessarily start thinking of your partner as your enemy, or you may start to think about your partner or your life partner with a question mark. Have I got enough or not? Or does the partner serve me enough? So the frustration, the anxiety, the fear in your love life as well as in your partnership or your ability to work with people or anyone and everyone becomes impacted, because the 6th house is also the house of daily life and the discipline in life. Many times with SADE SATI or the 7th house, the discipline in life is affected. You are not able to keep the same discipline, the same structure and order in your life. What time you get up, what time you go to work, how you come, when you come back to work, how you deal with people, everything becomes topsy-turvy. So the 6th house of service gets impacted, so something may happen at service in your career, which in turn impacts the 7th house of your relationship and how you work with people, how you deal with others on a day-to-day basis, not getting frustrated, not getting over anxious, or not treating everybody with the same stick, and then being able to overcome the obstacles that the 8th house throws at you. So the 8th house will keep throwing those obstacles at you. Everything will seem to become a hurdle. Everything seems to become a challenge for you. Everything seems to become an obstruction for you. Health becomes an issue. Relationship becomes an issue. And sudden turbulations may also throw you off the track. So the 7th house becomes an important SADE SATI period, because it is not only the Kendra placement, but because Moon also aspect the Lagna from the 7th house, and Moon also aspect the Lagna when Moon and Saturn both aspect the Lagna when Saturn is transiting over the 7th house and Moon is placed in the 7th house in the natal chart. So if that is the SADE SATI period, which is the peak period happening over the 7th house, try and retain your relationships. The partnerships are most critical for you. Hang on to the partnership, hang on to the relationship. Don't be lost in undue frustrations and fears, because the relationship may be impacted. Your ability to work with other people may be impacted. Sicknesses and illnesses, sudden things may flare up. Your visceral organs, your digestion may be off track. Chronic sudden illnesses which become a chronic ailment may come up. So blood pressure, cholesterol issues, heart ailments, everything may be suddenly triggered, and if you are not taking care of yourself during that SADE SATI period, they may become chronic. So losses in partnership may happen, health losses may happen, also sudden losses in the ability of generating income and property, and the legacy or inheritance may also be impacted. Even your relationship with your parents may go for a toss. So SADE SATI with the 7th house becomes an important placement. Keep your patience, keep your relationship impact with your parents, with your spouse, with people at work, and with your children. By the time the SADE SATI ends, you will find that if you have kept your relationship impact, not much is lost. If the SADE SATI is happening over your 8th house, which means the Moon is placed in your 8th house in your natal chart. So now the 7th house, 8th house and 9th house, all the 3 houses are impacted. Why? Because SADE SATI's rising period starts when Saturn goes into your 7th house, which is the first 2.5 years, or the first Dahya. And then the second 2.5 years when Saturn is passing over the natal Moon position in the 8th house. And the final 2.5 years, or the setting period, when Saturn is translating over your 9th house. So 2.5 years over the 7th, 8th and 9th house. The 3 houses become critical. 2 of the houses are very, very important. 7th house of partnerships, ability to deal with or work with others, your married life also, your partners placements also. And the 8th house of obstacles, tribulations and issues, chronic ailments and sudden flare-ups in issues. And the 9th house of fate and luck. So it starts off with your ability to work with people and your relationship slowly getting impacted. So misunderstanding or personality issues coming into the picture, or you not agreeing with your partners, or partners not thinking on the same line as you, or partners starting to take a different tangent from you, and because of which you suddenly face obstacles which the 8th house throws up. So this itself becomes an obstacle when you are not able to deal with your day-to-day life as smoothly as before. You are not able to relate to your spouse as smoothly as before. So either some of the other event gets triggered in your partnership or your ability to work with people, or some downfall happens. Somebody may cheat you, somebody may take you down, somebody is not treating you well, either in your team or your work or your spouse, or even other people who you deal with on a day-to-day basis, and that throws up sudden issues and challenges. So here the person is fighting fires almost on a day-to-day basis. You are trying to put out some fire or the other fire in some area or the other area. It's always running. It's become like a thriller movie with this car chase is happening, and some your turn, their turn, overcoming this obstacle, overcoming that obstacle, putting out this fire, taking care of this issue, taking care of that issue, and you are left panting and breathless at the end of the SADE SATI, the 7.5 years. And most of it is you run into bad luck or tough luck, because nothing seems to be working out for you, because the 9th house of fate and luck is also impacted. So obstacles and obstructions of the peak period of Saturn over Moon in the 8th house, where Moon also in the natural Kalpurush Kundali, Moon becomes debilitated. So here the person thinking ability becomes impacted. Your emotional issues overcome any clear thinking that you are able to do so far. So emotional upheavals create frustrations and fears. So in your partnership you may be impacted. Turbulations impact your relationships. tribulations impact your ability to study if you are in that age where you're trying to work, you're trying to get a higher degree, or going through learning, or doing your masters, or even trying to take a college degree. So that may get impacted. Your ability to focus may get impacted. Your ability to have good luck may be impacted. So here many times 2-3 times an effort is required for anything to manifest. So for a project to get cleared, you may require 2-3 times the effort, or begging, or asking for the approvals again and again. And so the entire 7.5 years looks as if you have not been able to achieve much, and you have been just putting out one fire after the other. So if the SADE SATI is happening with moon in the 8th house, you feel lost, you feel in a dark place where you're not able to get out, and some or the other challenges keep coming up. And yeah, you may even lose inheritance if your SADE SATI is happening over the 8th house, and you lose your relationship, your good relationship with your parents. So if the SADE SATI period happens where the property is being given to you, or God forbid you lose your parent, and the parent is signing a will deed for you, you may be the one who's losing out the most if you're during the SADE SATI period when that thing happens. So in general, when SADE SATI happens over the 8th house, this is one of the most critical houses where moon gets debilitated in the 8th house. So challenges to health, challenges to your mental frustrations, depressions may be the order of the day, fears, thinking too much, overthinking, frustrations may be order of the day, starting from relationships, starting from your good luck not manifesting, your long distance travels not bearing fruit, start hitting SADE SATI period when you are trying to travel over the long distance into different countries or overseas may come under the spanner, and that may be an obstacle that you will take long time to heal. By the time you end the SADE SATI period, a lot of things may be lost. So keep your frustrations under check, keep your fears under check, and even while you are running from pillar to post just to keep out the fires, put out the fires, ensure that your relationships are not impacted, and you seek the help of gurus and learned people, because the 9th house is involved. If the SADE SATI happens over the 9th house, which means moon is placed in your 9th house in your natal chart, and when moon is placed in the 9th house in the natal chart, and SADE SATI peak period will happen of the 2.5 years over the 9th house. However, the 8th, 9th and the 10th house, all three will be involved, because the first period or the first 2.5 years will start with the rising period of SADE SATI in your 8th house, and which will in turn impact the 9th house of faith and luck, high learning, high experiences, and the 10th house of career also, which where the last 2.5 years will be the setting period. So it will start off with certain obstacles will come out of the blue, and you don't know what hit you, because Saturn has triggered the 8th house. So while Saturn is protective also of the 8th house, because Saturn is the Karak of the 8th house, however, because it is payback period, and if somewhere you have not been able to do justice or commitment, or not stood by rules, regulation, then the 8th house triggers off certain obstacles and challenges and issues. Saturn becomes a reminder for you in the 8th house, and because of that, the 9th house of high experiences also gets triggered. So Saturn creates obstacles so that you learn higher, you understand the deeper meaning of life, you understand the deeper manifestation of life. So Saturn throws obstacles at you, challenges at you, tribulations at you, and through those experiences, how you handle those experiences, the 9th house of higher learning also gets triggered. Saturn wants you to understand the deeper meaning of life, and that becomes a higher learning through the obstacles that you face, through the fears that you face, through the frustrations of the 8th house. So generally, both 8th house gets impacted of throwing one challenge after the other, one obstacle after the other comes in, and you feel as if your luck and fate are stagnated. Anything in any area of life that you try, you feel there is an obstacle, you feel that there is a roadblock there, you feel there is a speed breaker there, and either your fate and luck seems to have run out, or long time for anything to come through, long time for a project to get approved, long time to get appreciation or credit at work, because the 10th house is the setting period of SADE SATI. The 10th house is also the house of bosses and supervisors, so those relationships also get impacted. So 8th house throws challenges and frustrations and issues and obstacles at you. 9th house seems as if the fate and luck has dried up. Your ability to work with gurus or ability to deal with your father or relate to father may also go down, or ability to take wise decisions may be impacted. You may take sudden decision out of frustration, and because of which your career may be impacted. Your loss in career may also happen. So if your SADE SATI period is happening with the 9th house where moon is placed, be really very careful. Don't over invest your energies in fears and frustration of the 8th house, unnecessary fears, because SADE SATI over the 8th house as the rising period gives you high fear that have I run out of luck. So during your SADE SATI period where moon is in your 9th house and the SADE SATI peak period happens over the 9th house, keep your peace, keep your frustrations and fears in check, keep your relationship with supervisors and managers intact, be prepared for higher learning, but don't stop from approaching your gurus or taking wise counsel from them, because that could be the only way out for you by the end of your SADE SATI period. Now if the SADE SATI period is over your 10th house, which means moon is placed in your 10th house in your natal chart. Now the three houses which are impacted are the 9th house, the 10th house and the 11th house, because the first 2.5 years starts with Saturn transits into your 9th house, or the first dahiya or the rising period starts, and then the next 2.5 years or the peak period where moon is placed in your 10th house and Saturn transits over it in the 10th house for 2.5 years, and the final 2.5 years in the 11th house where the setting period or the final 2.5 years happen. So the first, second and the third three dahiyas, 2.5 years are getting impacted through the 9th, 10th and the 11th houses. 9th and 10th houses are very, very important in your horoscope, because the 9th and the 10th houses are the houses of fate and luck and career. So if your fate and luck is tied to your career and both are getting impacted, then you will find that there will be challenges at work, or your relationship with managers and supervisors may be impacted. Even if you have had a smooth sailing so far in your life, during that SADE SATI period you will find that your relationship for some reason with the managers and supervisors go for a toss. There are misunderstandings, your projects are not getting the approvals like before, or not getting the appreciation like before, you are not getting the credit at work, and your managers somehow seem to falling out of place for you, which means that you don't seem to enjoy their confidence anymore. And so because even when you're presenting at work, when you're presenting your work, you're putting up a project work, your presentations are misunderstood, or they are not taken for the kind of work that you're put in. Your teamwork is also under question, and so the 9th house of fate and luck is dried up, so no lucky thing works for you even in your career. Sometimes long distance travels connected to your career, connected to your work also doesn't give you good fruits. If you're traveling overseas for a change in career or to manifest your career, those 2.5 years, especially when the peak period of SADE SATI happens, you find as if nothing is happening. And the 11th house of wishes and desires, or manifestation of wishes and desires, nothing comes through. And because your relationship with the supervisors is impacted, so your ability to gain higher ground in a career in a large organization and connected to your societal network also seems to be impacted. So if your SADE SATI is happening with the 9th, 10th and 11th houses, where 9th house is the house of fate and luck, 10th house is the house of career and your growth, and your 11th house is the house of gains and wishes and desires coming through and societal recognition, then all that seems to be dried up and tied up during those 7.5 years. So if your SADE SATI is happening with the 10th house of career, keep the focus on your relationship with your supervisors and your managers. Ensure that all project work is taken care of. Try and tie up all loose ends. Don't miss out even a small dot anywhere. Keep the focus on your work, because many times the domestic affairs will take you away or try and keep you away from work, because of which your work may be impacted. So keep the focus as much as possible at work, in your relationship with your bosses and supervisors, while not neglecting the 4th house of domestic life, because the domestic life can throw up challenges because of which work also may be impacted. And don't try and keep too high expectations of your wishes and desires being manifested, because those 7.5 years very less wishes may come true. So if you are able to keep afloat during those 7.5 years, then your career will also be protected, and your long-term goals in your related to career and work will also not be impacted. If your SADE SATI is happening over the 11th house, which means moon is placed in your 11th house in your natal chart. So then your 10th house, your 11th house and the 12th house, all three are impacted, because the 10th house is where when Saturn transits into, the first 2.5 years of your SADE SATI period happens, and then when Saturn goes into the 11th house, that the peak period of your SADE SATI, 2.5 years, or the second 2.5 years of your Dhaya, the peak period, and the final 2.5 years or the setting period, and the final Dhaya, final 2.5 years of the setting period in the 12th house. So yeah, 10th, 11th and 12th house, all three are impacted, all three activated. Now because the 10th house is the house of career, and that's where all the trouble starts. Something triggers at work, something changes at work, either the loss of role, loss of place in at work, or change of your boss, a change of your team, change of your department. Something may get triggered at work, or company not doing very well, or company not paying enough. Something gets triggered, because of which now you start to think of your placement in the large organization, or if you're working in a large organization with the 11th house is involved, am I really doing well? Am I really an important member of the team? So whatever I have done so far, the number of years have I given, have I got the fruit of my labor or not? So either the thinking starts to disturb you, your career, or the changes at work start to disturb you, or your manager gets changed. So some leadership change, some process change, some role change, some project work, or you starting to think, because moon is involved here, of Saturn going over the 10th house and then 11th and the 12th, penultimate to the moon and on the moon and the 12th house. So the person's mind is impacted. So the emotional upheaval happens where the person thinks that, am I truly getting benefited enough in my career, or does my manager continue to respect and give me credit or not, or some disturbance happens, because of which 11th house of gains is also impacted. So if you're working in a large organization and the 10th house of career gets impacted, then your growth gets stagnated. There is no more security to your job in a large organization. Especially this is true for people working in large organization. Or if you are connected to some social role that you do, in some way you're connected to society, you're trying to do something for society. For example, if your role gets connected to being a lawyer or a doctor or a counselor or an advisor, anywhere where large society is getting impacted through your work, then that work may become stagnated, or that work may bring about a change, or that work may bring about an upheaval, and so your wishes and desires and your goals towards that particular work that you're doing, that becomes impacted. So you feel stagnated, you feel nothing is working, your desires don't get met, and most important thing is your friendships get impacted. You lose friends. Many of the people who you think are your friends, curtain comes over your, the curtain is raised from over your eyes, and then you truly understand who your true friends are and who you are not your true friend by the end of SADE SATI, because this is a trying period. So this becomes a big test even for your friends. This becomes a big test for your social network. So if you truly want to test your social network, anyways it will be tested during the SADE SATI period, because you will have to reach out to many people in those times. Your connections at work may be impacted. So if you think of somebody at work as a friend or friendly to you, you will find that the curtain over your eyes, the wool over your eyes will be lifted, and you will be able to see them for who they are. Number of your 4 a.m. friends that you thought will also be tested. Number of your relationship will be tested. If you have somebody who you are in a relationship with connected to work, indirectly or directly, that relationship may also be impacted, because here the 11th house of wishes and desires is also impacted, which is also a Kama Bhava. So here it becomes important that you keep your desires in check, you also manifest the relationship well, keep your higher desires on check, or also keep your ambitions in check, because you will find that most of this period things are stagnated, there is not much movement over in your career. So keep your relation with supervisors good and healthy, keep your manifestations, keep your wishes and desires in check, and don't try to over test your friends, and don't reach so much out to friends unless critical, because you may lose those friendships. Especially because the 12th house is also impacted, you may end up spending a lot of money also. So a lot of waste and excess may happen in your efforts, especially connected to work. Not so much maybe with money, but more connected to efforts at work may not drive you or give you the gains, because the final setting period is happening over the 12th house. So career, wishes and desires, and waste and excess in your efforts coming through. This is also about if your career is connected to foreign lines, then in foreign lines during the SADE SATI period, you may not gain much, you may not get a promotion, you will feel stagnated. You may, if you are trying to find a job or change your job in foreign lands, then that may not come about easy. So if your SADE SATI is happening over 11th house, keep your wishes and desires in check, keep your relationship at work in check, keep your relationship with friends intact. Don't lose your friends, because these people will be the ones who may later on prove to be beneficial to you when your SADE SATI is over, and then you truly understand the value of your relationship and friendships. Now, last but not the least, if the SADE SATI is happening over the 12th house, where moon is placed in your 12th house, so your 3 houses get impacted. The 11th house gets impacted, the 12th house gets impacted, and the first house of the Lagna gets impacted. Why? Because the first 2.5 years starts with the 11th house of wishes and desires, which is the rising period or the first Dahya. Then the peak period or the second 2.5 years or the second Dahya, which happens over your 12th house, the second 2.5 years the peak period, and the final 2.5 years or the setting period, which is over the Lagna, which is over the first house. So something gets triggered in how you look at your wishes and desires. So if you have kept your wishes and desires on a certain goal in life, a certain purpose in life, and for far too long that has not come about, so suddenly during the first rising period of SADE SATI, when Saturn is going over your 11th house, that triggers the thought in your mind, the fears in your mind, the anxieties in your mind, the frustrations in your mind that none of my wishes and desires have come true. My friends have not been favorable to me, my friendships have not been favorable to me, my social network has not given me back. I have worked in the large organization for so many years, I have contributed so much, I have not got the true fruits of my labor so far, the true fruits of my contribution. And so with these frustrations and the fears that you have not done enough creates or triggers the 12th house of waste and excess, because the peak period is over the 12th house. So by the time Saturn transits into your 12th house of waste and excess, while Saturn is the Karaka of the 12th house and also protective, but because it is the payback time, Saturn makes you lose a lot of things, because 12th house is about charity, donating, losing, giving away. So you will find that you will lose enough, you will give up a lot during this 2.5 years, where you will find that. But this is also period of giving up waste and excess. Saturn will take away all that is wasteful. So on paper you may feel very, very angry, frustrated, you have lost so much. Friendships may be lost, relationship may be lost, money may be lost, or even health may be lost. Going to the clinics may become more of a norm. Your mental tension may create challenges, issues and depressions and higher fears, because the 12th house is involved, a Dusthana is involved. So the visits to the clinic may involve, a lot of notices from court cases may also happen. So you may end up either visiting police stations or visiting the legal authorities to try and clear certain things up, and because of which money may be lost, relationship may be also be lost, and unnecessary fears will also be created. But this is a giving up time. So if you're somebody who has done a lot of charity and good work in your life so far, then this SADE SATI period is not a bad period for you. But if you have not given back to society, you have not done your duty so far, you have not been charitable, you have not given enough donation, then this SADE SATI will take away a lot from you, and the period that was given to you earlier to be charitable, to be giving, and you have not used that, so your Saturn will force away the gains away from you. So if you have been if you are somebody in the SADE SATI period over your 12th house, and if you are losing a lot of money, then try and be more charitable, try and be more giving. It's not only about money, but be charitable in your emotions, be charitable how you help people, be charitable in giving more credit to people. Hold your horses, don't try to gain credit here, because every effort that you do to gain credit, to gain money, to do something well in your career or relationship, all will get into roadblock, all will get into losses. So why lose the effort? Why lose the relationship? Why lose the money? Why lose the health? So if your SADE SATI is happening over the 12th house, keep your stature intact, because the Lagna is involved here. The Lagna is where the setting period will come. So if you may lose too much in your life, and you may lose your status, you may lose relationship. So the Lagna, which gives you the standing in society, the prestige, and also gives you the confidence of who you are. A lot will be lost there if you lose too much because you have not handled the relationship well, you have not handled your friendship well, you have not handled your investments well, you have not handled the ability how you manage money well. So money may be an area also which may be impacted because the 12th house is the house of waste and excess. So expenditure may be very, very high. Less than what you earn, expenditure may also go up. And visits to the clinic may be happen, and friendship may be lost, and stature and society may also be lost. So one of the toughest challenges can be when SADE SATI happens over the 12th house. So keep your patience, keep your relationship impact, keep the purse strings tight, and don't try to have too many wishes and desires of the 11th house because that will be the trigger phase. Keep your motivation high, keep your wishes and desires in check, keep your ambitions in check. After the 7.5 years is passed, you will find that there will be more relief coming in than before, and you will find that your status in life is intact if you pass this 7.5 years more peacefully and be more giving, give more donation and be more large-hearted. So friends, these are the 12 placements of Saturn over different houses as a peak period of your SADE SATI, involving the penultimate house and the house next to it also. This is not a period of many gains, so please don't look at this video negatively. This is not supposed to create fears in your life, but it's more of a warning for you, more of a help and guidance for you how you should pass the 7.5 years of your SADE SATI period, so that you can manifest better results later rather than losing too much during your SADE SATI period. So when you're facing the SADE SATI period, keep your patience, keep your relationship intact, and you'll find that if you're giving, you expect less, and you are more, gaining through relationship by giving more during this time. Post your SADE SATI period, better results will come by you. So manage your frustrations well, manage your fears well, manage your SADE SATI period well, and you will find that you will come out of this more unscathed rather than being the biggest loser. So friends, like this video, share this video, and if you're looking for a personal consultation from me, please reach out to me, the links given below. Until some other time with some other video, this is your friend Astrology and Guide Irfan signing off. Ciao.